Earth was basking in its newfound role as an emerging player in the interstellar community. Decades of cautious exploration had led to trade partnerships with distant civilizations, and a seat, albeit a minor one, at the Galactic Council. Humanity still had much to learn, but peace seemed within reach. That peace shattered in an instant. It began with an interruption, a sharp static sound that cut through Earth's global communication networks, phones, televisions, tablets, and even personal augmented reality devices. When blank, then came the image. A sterile amphitheater-like structure dominated the screen. Rows of human captives filled the room, each bound with glowing restraints that emitted an eerie blue light. Their expressions ranged from abject terror to grim defiance. Behind them stood rows of tall reptilian guards clad in metallic black armor. They held plasma lances that crackled ominously. At the center of the broadcast was Supreme Executor Zal Torin, the leader of the Galactic Empire, towering and crimson-skinned. His eyes glowed faintly yellow. His ceremonial robe, embroidered with symbols of authority, cascaded to the polished floor. He stepped forward, clasping his clawed hands behind his back. "People of Earth," his voice rumbled low and venomous. The translation software embedded in the broadcast allowed his words to echo in every language simultaneously. "For years your kind has defied the Galactic Accord, exploiting our trade routes, stealing technologies beyond your comprehension, and expanding into territories you have no right to claim." His gaze swept the rows of terrified humans, and his lips curled into something resembling a sneer. "The Council of the Empire has deliberated long and hard, but there is only one message: your primitive species will understand power, consequence, punishment." The camera shifted, zooming out to reveal the scale of the atrocities. 70,000 captives, men, women, and even children, sat bound in the vast amphitheater. The cold glow of the restraints illuminated their pale, stricken faces. Gasps and muffled cries could be heard, though many sat in stunned silence. Zal Torin raised a clawed hand, and from above an enormous cylindrical device descended. It was a weapon, a massive energy cannon designed for precision destruction. Its surface gleamed under the harsh lights of the chamber, humming as it charged. "This," Zal Torin declared, turning back to the camera, "is a warning. Should Earth continue its insolence, your entire world will share their fate." The captives screamed, their voices blending into a single chilling crescendo of desperation. Some wept openly, while others strained against their restraints, their futile attempts to break free, a testament to human defiance. Zal Torin stepped aside, his expression cold and impassive. Without ceremony, the cannon fired. A blinding blue beam shot downward, enveloping the captives. The sound was deafening, a crackling roar that seemed to shake the very fabric of space. When the light subsided, the amphitheater was silent. Where once there were 70,000 souls, there was now only ash. The camera lingered on the scene for a moment, panning slowly over the devastation. Then the screen went black. The broadcast lasted only 5 minutes, but its impact was immediate and cataclysmic across Earth. People watched in horror as the news spread like wildfire. In New York City, crowds gathered in Times Square, where the broadcast had been displayed on massive digital billboards. Some stood frozen, their faces pale and blank with shock. Others wept openly or clung to loved ones. Anger bubbled beneath the surface, sparking heated conversations. "We have to strike back," someone shouted, their voice breaking through the murmurs. "We can't let them get away with this." In Beijing, the scene was much the same. Government officials convened emergency meetings, their expressions grim, as they reviewed intelligence reports. The Chinese president, flanked by military advisors, addressed the nation. "The Galactic Empire has committed an act of genocide," she declared. "Humanity must respond as one." In Cape Town, Archbishop Desmond Bathurst stood at the pulpit of a packed cathedral. His trembling voice echoed through the sanctuary. 70,000 lives snuffed out in an instant. He said, his voice heavy with sorrow, "We must mourn, but we must also find strength, for this is not the end of humanity's story." In the United States, the gravity of the situation was felt most acutely in the White House. President Evelyn Carter, a calm but resolute leader, stared at the screen in the Situation Room, her expression unreadable. Around her, military advisors, intelligence analysts, and cabinet members argued over the next steps. General Marcus Raines, the grizzled commander of Earth's unified military forces, broke the silence. "Madam President, this cannot stand." He growled, his fists clenched. "They've declared war on humanity. We must respond in kind." "And what exactly do you propose?" asked Secretary of State Lauren Yu, her tone sharp. "The Empire spans 1,000 worlds. Their technology surpasses ours by centuries. If we retaliate recklessly, we risk provoking an even larger attack. We're already at war. Rain shot back, 70,000 innocent lives slaughtered in cold blood. If that's not a declaration of war, I don't know what is." President Carter raised a hand, silencing the room. Her voice was steady, but there was a steely edge to it. "General Secretary, we need a clear-headed approach. This isn't just about revenge. It's about survival. The question isn't whether we respond, it's how." The room fell silent as the weight of her words sank in. Admiral Victor Halloway, commander of Earth Orbital Fleet, appeared on a holographic display. "Madam President," he began, "we have preliminary intelligence on the execution site. It's on a fortress world called Epsilon V. The facility is heavily guarded, but it's not impenetrable. If we act swiftly, we might be able to strike at the heart of their operation." "How quickly can we mobilize?" President Carter asked. "The Marines can be ready within hours," Halloway replied. "Would need to deploy our best, their elite units. This will be a high-risk mission, but it's our best shot at sending a message of our own." The president nodded, her mind already racing through the implications. "Do it," she said, "and God help us all." As Earth's military forces mobilized, the broadcast continued to reverberate across the planet. Protests erupted in major cities, with citizens demanding justice for the fallen. Families of the victims mourned their loved ones, their grief broadcast in turn by news outlets around the globe. But amidst the sorrow and anger, a spark of unity began to emerge. Humanity, so often divided by politics, culture, and ideology, found itself united by a shared sense of loss and a shared resolve to fight back. For the first time in its history, Earth stood together as one, and as its leaders prepared to send the Marines into battle, the message was clear: humanity would not bow. The Galactic Empire had underestimated Earth's resilience, and they were about to learn just how dangerous a cornered species could be. The hangar bay of the USSC Resolute, Earth's most advanced interstellar warship, buzzed with activity. Marines in full battle armor moved with precision and urgency, checking weapons, calibrating tactical gear, and preparing drop pods for what was to come. The air smelled of engine oil and ozone, the sharp tang of readiness and impending violence. Captain Alex Vargas stood at the center of the chaos, his dark eyes scanning the scene. He was a veteran of Earth's first off-world skirmishes, a man who had seen combat in the asteroid colonies and the outer moons. This, however, was unlike anything he had faced before. "Listen up," Vargas' voice boomed over the comms, cutting through the noise. "This is no ordinary mission. We are not just fighting for our lives. We are fighting for humanity itself. The Empire thinks they can intimidate us. They think they can break us. Today, we show them what humans are made of." A chorus of determined yes Sir echoed back as the Marines straightened, their resolve steeled. Vargas turned to his second-in-command, Lieutenant Sarah Holt, a sharp-eyed strategist with a reputation for unorthodox tactics. "Lieutenant, are the squads ready?" "Ready and waiting," Sir Holt replied. She adjusted her tactical visor, which displayed real-time data from the mission briefing. "Intel confirms the execution site is on Epsilon V in a fortress built into the planet's northern mountain range. It is heavily defended by automated turrets, aerial drones, and a battalion of the Empire's elite shock troopers." "And the objective?" Vargas asked, though he already knew the answer. "Strike fast and hard, destroy their execution facilities, rescue any remaining captives, and send a message the Empire will not forget. Epsilon V." The planet loomed large on the view screens of the Resolute's bridge. Epsilon V was a cold, barren world, its surface covered in jagged peaks and endless tundra. The fortress itself was a monolithic structure carved into the mountainside, bristling with weapon emplacements and shield generators. Admiral Victor Halloway's hologram flickered to life in the Resolute's command center. "Captain Vargas," he began, his tone grave, "our scans confirm multiple energy signatures around the fortress. The Empire is not taking any chances. Expect heavy resistance." Vargas nodded. "Understood, Admiral. We will hit them hard and fast." "You will have orbital support," Halloway continued. "The Resolute's railguns will neutralize their outer defenses before you deploy, but once you are on the ground, you are on your own. Good luck. Captain Earth is counting on you." The drop. The Marines boarded their drop pods, each a small, heavily armored craft designed to punch through planetary defenses and deliver troops directly to the battlefield Inside his pod, Vargas strapped into his seat and activated his comms. All squads report, he commanded. Alpha squad ready. Bravo squad ready. Delta squad locked and loaded. A tremor ran through the Resolute as its railguns fired, unleashing a barrage of kinetic slugs that streaked toward the planet below. Moments later, the ship's launch bay doors opened, revealing the cold void of space and the hostile world waiting below. Launch in 3, 2, 1, go. The pods fired in rapid succession, each streaking toward Epsilon V like a meteor. Inside, the Marines braced against the violent turbulence as their crafts entered the planet's atmosphere. Plasma bolts from the fortress's anti-air defenses lit up the sky, but the pods' reinforced armor held firm. "Brace for impact," Vargas shouted, as his pod slammed into the frozen ground, sending up a plume of snow and debris. The doors blew open with a hiss of compressed air, and the Marines poured out, weapons raised. The battle begins. The assault began with chaos and fire. The Empire's automated turrets roared to life, spraying plasma bolts that cut through the frozen air. The Marines returned fire with precision, their railguns sending high-velocity projectiles into the enemy emplacements. "Move, move, move," Vargas barked, leading his squad toward the nearest cover. A towering ridge of ice provided some shelter from the onslaught, but the air was alive with energy. "Lieutenant Holt, status," Vargas called over the comms. "Alpha and Bravo squads are engaging enemy forces on the western flank." Holt replied, "Delta is moving to disable their shield generator. We have got heavy resistance, but we are holding." "Good," Vargas said. "We will rendezvous at the main gate in 10. As the battle raged, the Marines pushed closer to the fortress. Explosions lit up the sky, and the sound of gunfire was deafening. Empire drones swooped down, their energy weapons carving through the snow, but they were no match for the Marines' coordinated fire. Breaching the fortress. The main gate was a massive steel barrier reinforced with energy shields. Delta Squad had managed to disable the shield generator, but the gate itself was still a formidable obstacle. "Plant the charges," Vargas ordered. A demolition expert moved forward, attaching high-yield explosives to the gate. The Marines took cover as the countdown began. 3, 2, 1, breach. The explosion tore through the gate, sending chunks of metal flying in all directions. Smoke and fire filled the air as the Marines stormed inside, their boots echoing on the cold steel floors. The interior of the fortress was a labyrinth of corridors and chambers, each one guarded by Empire soldiers. The Marines moved with precision, clearing rooms and securing objectives. In one chamber, they found a group of human captives, their wrists bound with the same glowing restraints seen in the broadcast. Vargas approached, his rifle slung over his shoulder. "You are safe now," he said, his voice firm, but reassuring. "We are here to take you home." Tears streamed down the captives' faces as the Marines freed them. The Empire strikes back. As the Marines pushed deeper into the fortress, the Empire's resistance grew fiercer. Zaltorans, elite shock troopers clad in dark armor and wielding advanced plasma weapons, launched a counterattack. "Fall back to defensive positions," Holt shouted, coordinating the Marines' response. The battle turned into a brutal close-quarters fight, with both sides sustaining heavy losses. Vargas fought with a grim determination, his rifle never wavering as he took down enemy after enemy. But the Empire's forces were relentless, and the Marines knew they could not hold out forever. The turning point. "Captain, we have got a problem," Holt said over the comms. "Our evac ships are under heavy fire. If we do not neutralize their anti-air batteries, we are not getting off this rock." "Understood," Vargas replied. "I will take a team to deal with it. Hold the line until we get back." Vargas and a small group of Marines broke away from the main force, moving toward the fortress's eastern tower. The climb was arduous, with enemy troops firing down on them from above. When they reached the tower, Vargas planted the final charge himself. As the explosion rocked the structure, the anti-air batteries went silent. "Evac is a go," Holt confirmed. "Get back to the landing zone, Captain." Victory at a cost. The Marines withdrew under heavy fire, carrying the freed captives and their wounded comrades. As they boarded their evac ships, the fortress erupted in flames, the result of carefully planted charges throughout the facility. Vargas looked out at the burning structure as the ship ascended, his face grim. The mission was a success, but the cost had been high. Back on the Resolute, the surviving Marines were met with cheers and relief, but as Vargas sat in the quiet of the debriefing room, he could not shake the weight of the lives lost, both those they had saved and those they could not. Earth fought back, he whispered to himself, but this is only the beginning. In the aftermath of the battle on Epsilon V, the euphoria of victory quickly faded as Earth's leaders realized the gravity of what had just transpired. The Galactic Empire had been dealt a significant blow, but the cost of their retaliation was still unknown. The decision to strike back had united humanity for a moment, but now the real consequences of that defiance began to sink in. Back on Earth, the War Council met in a secure underground facility in Washington, D.C. President Evelyn Carter sat at the head of the table, flanked by her top military advisors, intelligence officials, and diplomatic personnel. The mood in the room was tense, and the weight of what lay ahead was palpable. We've struck a decisive blow, but now we have to deal with the aftermath. President Carter said, her voice steady, but filled with concern. The Empire won't let this go. They'll retaliate, and we need to prepare for that. General Marcus Raines, who had led Earth's military forces during the assault, leaned forward. His face was lined with fatigue, but there was no mistaking the resolve in his eyes. We've taken out their execution facility. We've sent a message. But the Empire's military power is far beyond ours. We can't match them ship for ship or man for man. If they come at us with full force, we will be overwhelmed. The key is to hit them where it hurts, said Admiral Victor Halloway, appearing on the holographic display in the center of the room. Captain Vargas. He began, his tone grave. Our scans confirm multiple energy signatures around the fortress. The Empire is not taking any chances. Expect heavy resistance. We need more than that, President Carter interjected. We need to rally other civilizations. We can't fight the Empire alone. Galactic Empire's response. On the other side of the galaxy, the Supreme Executor Zaltorin was far from pleased with the results of the Epsilon V incident. His crimson eyes narrowed as he stood before a holographic display of the human assault on his fortress. The image was bleak, a facility reduced to rubble, and several high-ranking officers among the Empire's elite forces dead. They dare strike at us, Zaltorin rumbled, his voice laced with fury. A barbaric species unworthy of the galaxy's attention thinks they can challenge the might of the Empire. He turned to his advisors. Prepare for retribution, double the patrols, increase the military presence on every border world, and let us make an example of Earth. You are sure, Executor, that this will serve to deter them? One of his commanders asked cautiously. It will, Zaltorin said coldly, or Earth will cease to exist as a threat. An alliance forms. Back on Earth, as the military leaders convened, the diplomatic corps was working just as tirelessly while the rest of humanity prepared for possible war. Earth's diplomats scrambled to secure alliances with other interstellar civilizations that had grown wary of the Galactic Empire's growing influence. Ambassador Ian Walker sat in a high-rise embassy in the Galactic Council's capital. His team worked around the clock to reach out to allies who were equally concerned about the Empire's dominance. He had already made contact with the Andorans, a peaceful and technologically advanced species, whose fleet had clashed with the Empire before, and the Tharn, a reptilian species that had been slowly annexed by the Empire over the past few decades. I've spoken to the Andorans, Walker said, his voice grave, as he relayed the information to President Carter and her team via secure communication. They're willing to join forces, but they're hesitant. They want guarantees that Earth will not drag them into an open war they can't afford. And the Tharn, President Carter asked, leaning forward. They're more interested in revenge, Walker replied. They've had enough of the Empire's exploitation. They'll fight with us, but we need to move quickly before they make any rash decisions. We can't afford to wait, Carter said. If we don't act now, the Empire will crush us. We need a united front, whether or not these civilizations join us. We need to prepare to fight for survival. The war machine rises. Back on Earth, the military machine was rapidly being mobilized. The Resolute, Earth's flagship warship, was reinforced with additional support vessels and tactical strike teams. Captain Vargas, who had led the Marines on the successful assault on Epsilon V, was tasked with a new mission to lead Earth's fleet into battle against the Empire, striking first to delay their retaliation. Vargas stood on the deck of the Resolute, staring out into the dark expanse of space. The crew was working furiously to prepare the ship for deployment, and the tension was palpable. Captain Lieutenant Holt said as she approached, "We've got word from the Andorans they're on board with a joint strike. Their fleet will rendezvous with ours at the neutral zone, and then we move together into Empire-controlled space." Vargas nodded, his jaw tight. "Good. Let's make sure we don't give them a chance to retaliate. We'll hit them fast and hard, just like we did on Epsilon V." "Understood, sir." A shifting tide. As the fleet prepared to launch, President Carter stood before the world in a live broadcast addressing the people of Earth. "Today we stand not as separate nations, but as one people united in the face of a threat greater than anything we have ever known." She said, her voice unwavering. "The Galactic Empire has shown us its brutality, and we will not stand idly by. We will fight not just for our survival, but for the future of humanity and the freedom of every species under the Empire's rule. Earth is no longer a backwater planet." She continued, "We are a force to be reckoned with. The fight for our future begins today." The first strike. The fleet left Earth's orbit in a coordinated assault. Captain Vargas, Admiral Holloway, and the newly allied forces watched as their ships slipped into hyperspace, heading for the heart of the Empire's territory. The battle ahead would be their most difficult challenge yet, and the risks were higher than ever. As the fleet approached the Empire's borders, every crew member was aware that the war had only just begun. The first strike would determine the course of humanity's future. The stakes had never been higher. Vargas looked at the stars ahead. "This is it," he said quietly, "our message to the Empire." As the human fleet neared the outer rim of the Galactic Empire's controlled space, the atmosphere aboard Earth's warships was thick with anticipation. The alliance of Earth, the Andorans, and the Tharn had formed quickly, but they were still a fragile coalition. This was the first joint operation between them, and none of them knew how they would fare against the full might of the Empire. Yet the stakes were clear. Either they would defeat the Empire and secure their place in the galaxy, or they would fall into subjugation and extinction. The tension builds. Captain Alex Vargas stood at the command center of the Resolute, staring at the holodeck display in the enemy fleet's positions. His fingers lightly traced the screen as he studied the patterns, trying to predict where the Empire might strike. First, the Andoran fleet had arrived earlier than expected, their ships sleek and fast, their technology far beyond anything Earth had at their disposal. The Tharn fleet was larger but more traditional, relying on brute force and heavy weapons. "Status report," Vargas barked to his officers. "We're approaching the Imperial border." Captain Lieutenant Sarah Holt responded, her fingers flying across her console. "The Empire's ships are within our detection range. They haven't made any aggressive moves yet, but they're prepared for a fight." "They will move soon enough," Vargas muttered, his hand hovered over the button to send a fleet-wide communication. "All ships prepare for battle. If we're going to survive this, we must strike first." The Empire prepares. On the other side of the galaxy, Supreme Executor Zaltorin was watching the incoming fleet with cold calculation. He had known the humans would act boldly, but he hadn't anticipated such a swift and coordinated response. The Earth Alliance, as they had come to call themselves, had secured an unlikely unity in the face of the Empire's growing tyranny. Now he had to ensure their hubris didn't lead to their doom. "They are getting close, Executor," one of his commanders said. "Shall we engage them now?" "No," Zaltorin replied, his deep voice reverberating in the war room. "Let them come, let them think they have the advantage. Their arrogance will be their downfall. We'll strike when they're within range of our full forces." Zaltorin's fleet had already begun to form a massive formation near the neutral zone, a strategic position that would allow them to engage from multiple fronts. He had no intention of letting the humans get too comfortable. The first clash. As the human fleet entered Imperial space, their ships opened fire. Almost immediately, the first salvo echoing through space. The Andorans and the Tharn had both shown the strength of their firepower. But Earth's ships, though not as advanced, fought with unmatched tenacity. The Resolute, Earth's flagship, fired its massive main cannon, sending a volley of high-velocity projectiles toward an Imperial destroyer. Direct hit. Captain Lieutenant Holt shouted, "They're retaliating." Explosions rocked the hull of the ship as plasma fire from the Empire's retaliatory barrage pummeled the Resolute's shields. The battle had begun in earnest, and the Empire's response was swift and brutal. The Imperial ships moved in like a swarm, massive dreadnoughts flanked by smaller fighters and cruisers. Despite their numerical advantage, Earth's ships fought back with unexpected precision. The battle turned chaotic as the fleets collided in space fighter squadrons from both sides, engaged in tight dogfights, their speed and agility crucial in avoiding the devastating firepower of the larger capital ships. The Andorran fleet provided cover for Earth's vessels, their advanced technology allowing them to slice through Imperial ships with ease. The Tharn fleet, meanwhile, pounded enemy ships with their heavier fire, giving the Empire a taste of their own brutal tactics. Despite the initial success, the Empire wasn't going down easily. The humans had managed to get the first hit in, but now the true strength of the Empire began to show. Zal Torin's counterattack. As the battle raged, Zal Torin observed from his command ship, his mind calculating each move. He had allowed the humans to feel as though they had an advantage, but now he was ready to strike. With everything he had, the Empire had been preparing for a decisive blow. Commander Zal Torin said, his voice icy, deploy the Extermination-class ships. The Extermination-class ships were the most feared vessels in the Empire's fleet, massive, heavily armored ships designed specifically for total annihilation. They were capable of decimating entire fleets with their devastating weapons, and they were about to be unleashed. As the human and Imperial fleets continued their skirmish, Zal Torin's new weapon arrived on the battlefield. 3 enormous Extermination-class ships dropped out of hyperspace, their energy weapons lighting up the sky. As they began to fire relentlessly on the human ships, the Resolute took the first hit. Its shields flared as the massive plasma blast struck, but the ship held firm. Brace for impact, Captain Vargas ordered, as another blast hit the ship's side, sending a shockwave through the hull. The impact knocked several crew members off their feet, but the Resolute's crew recovered quickly. "Sir, we've got incoming fighters from the Empire's dreadnoughts," Lieutenant Holt reported. "We can't hold them off forever. We need to fall back." "Negative," Vargas growled, his jaw set with determination. "We've got to keep pushing forward. We can't let them intimidate us." Desperation and resilience. The battle had quickly escalated from a fierce exchange of fire to a brutal struggle for survival. As the extermination ships continued to unleash destruction, Earth's fleet was beginning to falter. The Andorran and Tharn ships had taken heavy damage, and their forces were starting to thin. The Resolute's crew fought valiantly, but every moment brought new challenges. The Empire was relentless, and their superior firepower began to show. "Captain, we've lost contact with Alpha Squadron," Lieutenant Holt called out, her face tight with worry. "We're losing fighters on all fronts." Vargas gritted his teeth. He knew the odds were quickly becoming insurmountable, but giving up was not an option. He looked to the Andorran and Tharn commanders who were still with him, their ships badly damaged, but holding on. "Push through," Vargas shouted. "We fight for our future." And so, despite the odds, Earth's fleet pressed on, determined to hold the line and sent a message to the Empire that humanity would never yield. The battle for survival. The tide of battle shifted as Zal Torin's extermination ships closed in on the remaining human fleet. With every second that passed, the Empire's grip on victory tightened. Yet, even in the face of near-sure destruction, Earth's resolve was unbroken. In the depths of space, where the stars were blotted out by the shadow of war, humanity fought for survival. Captain Vargas, battered but not broken, ordered one final maneuver, a desperate strike against the Empire's flagship. With their remaining fighters and the full might of the Resolute's firepower, the humans surged forward, their determination their greatest weapon. "Fire everything we've got," Vargas commanded as his ship and the remaining Allied forces moved in for one final assault.